Hey folks, it's the Red, and welcome back to the Crash Series review with Kaz and Nick.
Hello.
As we last left off, we had just finished covering the PS1 era of games, with the last game we covered being Crash Bash. And now, as we move into the new millennium, we finally come to our first multi-console release, Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, released in 2001 for the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. It was developed by Traveler's Tales, who made their mark in the gaming scene with releases of Sonic 3D Blast and Sonic R. And nowadays they develop the LEGO games.
The thing with this game is that it's trying to be too much like the original ones, and I'm not entirely sure if it pulls it off well enough.
Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of recycled concepts. If you've played Crash 3 already, then you're probably not going to find a whole lot new here.
No.
I mean, they tried to bring in some original elements like new power-ups, such as the super tiptoe ability.
Yeah. It's allowed you to walk on top of Nitro.
I pressed the wrong button once at the start of a time trial and tiptoed over it.
So while this doesn't really introduce much in the way of new gameplay-wise, the story does continue from Crash 3. Basically, Uka Uka calls a meeting of all the bad guys together, scolds them about how they're not being evil enough, and Cortex decides to put together his latest plan, to develop a Super Bandicoot, to crush Crash once and for all. And how's he going to do it?
With Crunch?
Yeah. It is also worth noting that this is the debuting appearance of Crunch, who would later become a good guy, but he's a bad guy in this game. And we're also introduced to the elemental masks. I can't remember their names. Kaz, can you fill us in?
It's Lolo, Pyro, Rocco, and Steve.
Steve?
Wawa.
Wow.
Wawa. Okay. And Crash has to put a stop to all of these masks by collecting all the crystals.
Another recycled gameplay element there.
Still gathering crystals? Old habits die hard, don't they?
It does have a pretty interesting story, but there is one problem I have with the cutscenes, and that is that most of the voices in this game are getting drowned out by the music.
But the power source is the final missing crucial element. Yes. So they were responsible for a few earthquakes, floods, and that little ice age a couple of centuries back. You worry too much, brother.
Don't even think about collecting those crystals, Grunt. Because if you do, I'm gonna bury you alive.
I mean, at a lot of these scenes, you can't even tell what they're saying, because they're talking so softly, and the music is so loud.
I can remember that most of the things being drowned out by background characters, like when Crunch is talking on the projector, the sound of the screen behind him making a really loud noise and muffling him out.
This is the creature who keeps sabotaging your master plan? Ha! You gotta be kidding. I'll exterminate this field rat in no time.
I mean, Crash 3 kinda had this problem too, but it was a lot less noticeable.
So going back to the Crunch, Crunch is the boss baddie at the end of every warp room after you collect every 5 crystals.
And he uses the power of the mask to fight Crash in each of these boss fights. Or,
Yeah.
in theory, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. The elements could have been so much more added to this game.
Could have done more with it, yeah.
Yeah, they could have had like wind blowing in levels and things set on fire, but no.
Instead, let's
they've
encase
only used-
Crunch inside a rock ball or turn him into a ghost.
Also, you don't know what happens to him after the level, after you defeated Crunch. What happens to the elemental mask? You don't see them being destroyed, you don't see them getting trapped again, they just...
To the intro,
nothing.
Crash uses 5 of the crystals to put it back into its hibernation state. But yeah, we never see this happen, so if you don't watch the intro, you're not gonna know that.
This one adds a lot more things you can ride in it, like a dragonfly thing and...
Yes, the big hover robot suit thing. And COCO's scooter as well.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of COCO, she's a fully playable character in this game with her own moveset and everything.
Yeah.
The music in this game, yeah, it's good, I guess, but honestly, I can't remember but a handful of tunes from it.
Yeah, nothing stands out as much as the original did.
No. There's only one song I can remember. and that's the medieval ones where the big dragon chases you. That's the only thing I can remember, and that's only because those squeaking bats.
Yeah.
I remember the
remember those.
one level that was called Weather something. I don't remember the full name, and I remember the snow levels.
Weathering Heights.
Wuthering Heights, that's the name.
Yeah.
I remember all the levels. I just the music.
I might just remember the snow levels though, because I remember a demo disc that had that stage in it.
Was it me or was this game's controls really, really like hard to control?
They felt a little loose to me.
Yeah, Crash always felt a lot more floaty.
Yeah, I get that this is the first of the 6th generation consoles, so everybody's expecting smooth frame rates and silky gameplay, but he seems pretty floaty overall in this game.
Like, it was a nightmare on the time trials where you had to hang from the grates and you went at the slowest pace possible.
He went a lot faster in the classic games. Why is he going at snail speed here?
In Crash 3, monkey barring on the netting was always...
They must have been really proud of that animation of him climbing across that grate, so they wanted to put it up there as long as possible.
Yeah, he used to swing like mad as well.
Yeah.
That's the controls, and the graphics I'm not too keen on as well.
They seem pretty, they seem a little flat, really, some of the colors.
It just, everything just seems, I don't know.
For a first-year PS2, Xbox, GameCube game, I think I was expecting better from the graphics.
Yeah.
I seem to remember this one having a lot of weird difficulty spikes in as well. Things like, I especially remember the Red Gem bonus level taking me absolutely forever, when others would just sort of breeze through in 1 or 2 lives.
Yeah, I could probably agree with that.
That walking robot thing that looks like from Alien, that was hard to get past, where you had to jump and duck under lasers.
Yeah.
So overall, it's a pretty solid Crash experience that doesn't really take a lot of risks, and if you played the first 3 games, you're not going to find a whole lot new here, but hey, this is a first-time multi-console release, so if you're an Xbox or GameCube owner and you haven't played a Crash game yet, hey, go for it, you're going to love this game. Understandably, Traveler's Tales had big shoes to fill, with the last main game being Crash 3, but at the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to say they were doomed from the start. I think they could have made the game better. They just didn't. So overall, I would probably give this game 7 out of 10. It's a good Crash game, but it didn't take a lot of risks. They went for too much of a play-it-safe approach.
It seemed like it had lots and lots of ideas, but didn't pull lots of the ideas through well enough. So I'm probably going to give it about a 6, and I'm being really harsh.
I felt this one, again, it was a very play-it-safe choice by the developers. Maybe they knew that the PS1 editions had a very strong fan base and they didn't want to pull away from that too much. And it sort of shows in what feels like a lot of unfinished concepts, like the elementals being brought in, and a lot more could have been done with them. Maybe that would have detracted from the standard Crash feel, or I don't know, but I will go probably on the same scale here and give it a 6.
Alright, so the first step into the new generation may not be the strongest, but let's see if we can change that around. But before we move on, there is one last thing I need to mention about Wrath of Cortex. For the GameCube owners, a special bonus minigame was added to the game, and if you own a Game Boy Advance and the GameCube Game Boy Advance link cable, you could download this minigame called Crash Blast. It's a pretty basic point-and-shoot minigame. You use Crash's Wampa Cannon to shoot at Crash's enemies while avoiding his friends. You could also shoot crates to get more ammunition for more shooting. Basically just accumulate the highest score you can. A pretty simple, basic game, worth a playthrough or 2 if you are able to do so. But don't worry, you're not really missing out on much if you don't play it. And it was more of a promotion for the next game anyway. But yeah, we're going to take a little detour onto the Game Boy Advance, where we see our first game by Vicarious Visions. And that would be Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, released in 2002, and released in Europe as Crash Bandicoot XS.
Extra small.
Thank you.
I really liked this game.
It basically takes all the concepts of Crash 2 and 3 and puts them into a 2-dimensional platform.
Being chased by huge polar bears. There was sewer levels,
a lot of the favourite original concepts levels.
Yeah.
As for our story, well, Cortex has developed a planetary minimizer which shrinks the world into the size of a Wampa fruit. And it's up to our teeny tiny Crash Bandicoot to go around, and how's he gonna stop it? Collect all the crystals! Because if you haven't figured it out yet, collecting all the crystals is the solution to all your problems. Stubbed your toe in the doorway? Collect all the crystals! Car won't start? Collect all the crystals! Toilet's clogged? Collect all the crystals!
If only it was that easy. Also, I have another complaint about this game. I like the gameplay and the graphics and everything, even though it is for a GBA. But Cortex, once again, doesn't do anything. Once he shrank down the world, he doesn't do anything with the world. He doesn't interfere with the world at any. He just like puts it on his mantelpiece and just leaves it.
Pretty half-baked evil plan.
Yeah.
Then again, it's a pretty half-baked villain at this point.
Yeah.
Lots of enthusiasm after being beaten down so many times.
All he seems to be doing is just watching Crash and sending his bad guys, shrinking down his minions to go and attack him. Where he
Clearly,
could
he's
just
not too worried. I mean,
No.
he's only been beaten 5 times. I mean, it's not like it's going to happen again this time. I mean, he's just the size of
Surely
a
not.
flea at this point.
Exactly, he could have squashed him and then that would be done with it. But
Yeah,
no, he
true, like-
watches him. He does nothing but watch.
You think, stick him in a Tupperware and put him in the fridge and be done with it.
Yeah, he could have set up cameras what would have been less expensive, but no, he just sits there and watches.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as gameplay, everything you've seen in the first 3 games are present here, including the power-ups that you get after beating a boss.
Yes, all the old bosses are back. I can remember Dingodale being in it.
And
Yep.
most of them
Also
played
Wolf
much like they
Tower 1.
did back on the PlayStation 1.
So I got another thing. Where is Cortex standing when he shrinks the world?
On the
From his Cortex Vortex, I mean planetary minimizer.
Surely if he shrank the planet, then the Cortex Vortex would be floating around in space, heading towards the nearest sun, if he's disturbed the planet's
Gravity,
gravity.
center of gravity,
Yeah.
yeah maybe.
I think that there's another flaw in his plan right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're trying to apply logic to a game about an orange anthropomorphic bandicoot that spins really fast and thwarts the evil attempts of a mad scientist whose head is bigger than his body. But when the planet gets shrunk down and no gravitational changes occur, that's where they're crossing the line? So the
Yeah.
gameplay and the music, all from the PlayStation 1, but what do we have to say about the graphics, especially for a Game Boy Advance game?
I really like the graphics for this one. It still had the feel of a Crash game, like neat little animations in the background, making the levels seem alive.
The graphics were really
Maintained the
nice. It
charm.
reminds me of Donkey Kong Country.
The controls were just as good. He was easy to control.
So let's go ahead and score this thing then. I think it's a great game. It's a great first portable game. Perfect Crash on the go material here. I'll give it another 7 out of 10.
I'm
Because again,
gonna.
they went for another play it safe approach. I also give it some flack for being a little too easy.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm gonna go with a 7. I really liked it, but it didn't add anything new.
Well, I'm not in a massively qualified position to score it. I've only played a handful of bits of it. I borrowed cartridges in a long time in the past. What I played, I enjoyed, and yeah, I can see where you're coming from when you say that it was another play it safe, that it didn't go out into the realms and add new things. But for a GBA outing, it was good as far as I remember. So yeah, I'll weigh in with a 7.
Okay, next game in our set. Again for the Game Boy Advance. Crash N-Tranced, released in 2003. Pretty much everything you saw in Huge Adventure will be back in this one, with exception to a couple of new powers. But we'll get to
Although
that
this
in a
one,
minute. Let's quickly cover our story here.
the Cortex isn't the main boss baddie in this one.
Yeah, he's been launched off into space in the last game. Oh, spoiler alert, he gets launched into space.
Ugo's fed up with failure, so he goes with entropy, and
He's got his own little scheme to take over the world.
yes, this one also introduces a new character called N-Tranced, who can hypnotize people.
In case you couldn't tell from his name.
Yeah.
Egg-shaped being from the 5th dimension.
Yes.
He brings Crash and his friends into his dimension by opening up a portal. However, he doesn't get Crash. Yes, in a fight with Aku Aku and N-Tranced, somehow Crash splits into two and N-Tranced ends up capturing fake Crash.
Without knowing that it is fake Crash, so he thinks that it's real, normal Crash.
Because, you know, you can't tell from those exaggerated eyebrows and the big buck teeth. That's not enough distinguishable factors. Everything else about him is the same.
Orange, 2 legs, 2 hands, 2 eyes.
Blue pants.
Yep.
The pants are what sells it. So the real Crash now has to go on a quest to rescue his friends who have now been brainwashed to fight against him. And how's he going to do it? Okay, so basically, we're back to the same concept we saw in the last, 4 or 5 games. We're in a warp room, we're going collecting crystals, and like I said, this time they decided to mix it up a bit by giving you a couple of new powers. The Super Slide and the Super Jump.
He also mixed it up by making the main boss baddies his friends, so at one point you have to fight Coco and Crunch.
Who then become playable afterwards.
Yes, to free them.
Crunch has in the meantime become a friend since 2 games ago.
Yes.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that we can cover here because everything that you saw in Huge Adventure is pretty much in this game. It's recycled Crash 2 and 3 concepts.
And quite heavily recycled a lot of throwbacks to the original Naughty Dog games.
I think the boss fights are a little harder this time, but that is because N-Tranced is such a unique enemy and N-Trophy just takes more hits to defeat this time. So, really, what else is there to cover?
Well, the controls and music are recycled, so we've already covered that.
Right. The only thing that's really changed here is the story.
I don't know what else to say on it.
Yeah, there's not really much else to say on it, so... Yeah, here we go, we're just running the cycles again. N-Tranced was just another play it safe, maybe now they're playing it too safe concept.
Really not much new
And really, I'm starting to get a hankering for a new Crash adventure, and this did not deliver that. But still, it's not a bad game, per se. It does have more riding concepts like the Altosphere levels, and flying through space.
Because everyone loves doing that.
Yeah.
It deviated a little more from the platforming than they did in the last game, and as a platforming fan, that kind of disappointed me. Overall, I'm going to give N-Tranced a 6 out of 10. I want to give it more, but they should have did more with it.
I totally agree with that, so I'm going to give it a 6 as well. They should have done more with it.
What do you think, Nick?
This one for me, it's a very much, if it ain't, don't fix it, move on their part.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, and so what with it being, well, almost a reskin, it's good, didn't add enough to make it exciting for me, but it's not a bad game all the time, so I'll go with a 6 as well.
Alright, solid 6, 18 out of 30 from all of us. And so that takes us to our next recycled concept, Crash Nitro Kart, released in 2003 for the PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and Game Boy Advance.
And the N-Gage.
Yeah, it also came out on the N-Gage, but for the life of me, I can't name anybody who had an N-Gage, so who cares?
Back to the racing again. This time the story's completely different.
Yes, they did come up with a new story, because they can't really change anything about the gameplay, because that would be taking too much risk.
God knows we don't want to do that.
Basically, for our story, Emperor Velo the 27th has captured Cortex and Crash and all of their friends, and are now forcing them to race in the Galaxy Circuit.
For their entertainment?
For the entertainment of all the people, yeah. They have to go around collecting trophies and keys, racing against the Galactic Champions. All of them to save the world for being destroyed, because that's what's going to happen if any of them lose. The cutscenes in this game are pretty nice.
The one that sticks out to me is the first one, where Crash, the light beams on Crash's face, he puts sunglasses on and goes back to sleep.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And at least this time the good and evil teams are more evenly split. What with there being another good character.
Yes.
Opposed to the Crash team racing.
Also in this one, there is a split in the story. You can either go for the good side or the bad side. and each side has 3 playable characters that you can switch whenever you want. So it's not like Crash Team Racing where you're stuck with one character the whole way through the level. You can switch in between the 3 characters and they all have their own things they're good at. Like Crash is the Speed King and COCO's good at turning.
They made the story more interesting too by having a good and bad side, instead of giving you one story regardless of who you've picked.
You will have to race in order to win the Galaxy Circuit and go home.
You will have to race in order to win the Galaxy Circuit and save Earth for us to conquer.
There was also another team with players that were hypnotized, like Dingo Dial and Polar.
Polar and Pura. They were hypnotized to be, gasp, neutral characters.
There was, guess who was hypnotized by?
Could it be that big purple guy?
The Egghead.
The Egghead? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Not
interesting.
Eggman.
Also noting that Spyro replaces Pura in the handheld version.
Yes. And that brings me to my other point. There are plenty of stuff that you can unlock in this game, much like there was in CTR, but if you own the GameCube version and the Game Boy Advance version of this game, and a link cable, money, 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 then you could instantly unlock everything without having to play through the game.
Wait, Spyro replaces Pura?
Yes, Spyro is a playable character in the Game Boy Advance version.
Pura's the best character.
And while we're still talking about the GBA, it's also worth noting that, like with Wrath of Cortex, there was another special minigame added to this if you own the GameCube version, and that was Crash Party USA. A neat little minigame where you press buttons in correct timing. It's a lot like Guitar Hero. You've got buttons coming across a scale, you just hit them at the right timing, you progress to the next round. They start adding buttons and making it go faster to make each round harder. Pretty simple, kind of fun, worth a playthrough or two. But there is a special bonus. If you complete 10 rounds of this minigame, you can play against the final boss of Crash Nitro Kart with 3 missiles already in your inventory. So it's pretty interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. One of the biggest changes in Crash Nitro Kart from Crash Team Racing is the ability to turn your car into a little magnetic hover car that lets you drive upside down. It's a neat little gimmick, but frankly pretty pointless in my opinion, because it doesn't add anything to the gameplay and actually slows you down. So if there's ever a point in the track where you can either drive like normal or drive on a hover car, driving like normal will be the faster way to go.
Most of the time it did not give you a choice, so you ended up being slowed down anyway, and I found it quite glitchy.
Yes, it makes it very hard to do turbo boosts.
And turn, because you just be all over the place and lose control of your car. You pretty much have to just drive in a straight line or you lose.
Another new gameplay element is the team-up feature. You play with this mode by default in adventure mode. You just drive within the proximity of your teammate, and when your gauge fills up, you press triangle or Y or whatever button you have on your control in the top one, and then you can go into an item frenzy where you can unleash an unlimited number of items for a short time. All of your familiar weapons are back too, the TNT, the missiles, the bowling bomb, and replacing the warp orb is a little tornado that goes and seeks out the first place racer.
Okay, graphics. Judging from the cutscenes, I really like how they updated the character models, not so much COCO because they gave her an entirely different outfit. The Crash model, I thought it was a really nice update of the old one.
This
like
is
the
definitely a
classic
step
Crash.
up from the Wrath of Cortex.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like furry and he looks like the classic Crash. And COCO, yeah, this is the one where they gave her the new outfit, which is a step in the wrong direction if you ask me.
It almost seems like if Naughty Dog had this sort of hardware available when they made Crash 1, this is how Crash might have started.
Yeah, I think the Crash player model and the cutscenes, forget the cover art because he just looks a bit weird.
Especially the Japanese box cover art.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go ahead and score this thing. Yeah, it seems to cover pretty much everything that CTR did. Once again, another play-it-safe style gameplay that tries to be unique by having upside-down driving cars and more playable characters.
It doesn't pull it off well enough in my opinion.
It's got tougher controls that if you did play CTR, you're gonna have to get reused to them. But overall, I did like the game, though. It just took a little longer to get into than it did CTR. Overall, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I know I'm being real consistent with the 7s here, but Sue.
Yeah, I think what was Crash Team Racing being the one to compare it to, again, it wasn't a bad game, but when you compare it with Crash Team Racing and how far ahead Crash Team Racing seemed against the other field at the time, this one doesn't seem to hold up so well in my head. I might be biased, but so yeah, for this one, what with my control issues here and there, I'm going to go and give it a 6.
6 out of 10 from Nick. Alright, Kaz, what do you say?
I like the story in this. I like the player models. I can remember a tiny bit of the music, but the controls really let it down for me. They just seem too chunky and hard to control. Once again,
I agree with that.
Comparing it to Crash Team Racing, where the controls are flawless. So bearing that in mind, it kind of made me repeat some of the levels again and again because I kept losing due to being flung off the track due to the hovercraft. So
yeah, I can see those things getting pretty annoying. Wait a minute, how'd you fall off a track if you're magnetized to the track?
Trust me, I found a way.
Polarity with a little red.
Negative polarity, of course.
Yep.
Yes. So anyway, I'm gonna give it. Can I do 0.5s?
I would rather if you did solid numbers, whole numbers.
I'll give it a 6 then.
Alright. Why, would you have gone 5.5?
Yes.
Ah. Well, I'm only giving you a 6, so. With that, let's move on to the last game by Vicarious Visions, and that is Crash Purple, released in 2004, and released in Europe as Crash Fusion. And I suppose we should also cover its sister game, Spyro Orange / Spyro Fusion. Boy, we're seeing a lot of Spyro lately, aren't we? In Crash
Well, they've always had a long relationship, back when in the PS1 era, when they always had demos of the other Spyro games.
Yeah, they have demos of each other's games.
Spyro 1 demo within Crash 3. And a long Spyro 1 demo within Crash 3 as well. I'm taking a fair bit of disc.
I really like the concept of this. It's
taking two wonderful things and mashing them together.
Yeah, to make one beautiful thing.
Yes, it only makes me think about all the other video game franchises that I would love to see this happen to, like Mario and Sonic. Wait a minute.
Like Metal Gear Solid and Cooking Mama. Wait.
So our story this time is that Cortex and Ripto have decided to join forces, although it's never explained how they met each other. I don't think it is.
And Ripto survived the events of Spyro 2.
This is following Spyro 2?
Met in a pub.
How Ripto survived, yeah. Down the booth for 1 week, you know. Oh, right, yeah. I've got this flag going on.
So they decide to send out Ripto's minions, who are wearing masks of Crash and Spyro, and they send them after Crash and Spyro respectively, to make them think that they're enemies. But of course they're not fooled by this, and they set out to go and stop them. And what's Crash going to do this? Collect all the crystals!
Of course.
At first you arrive in the game, and I'm still talking about Crash Purple here. You first arrive in the game, and then suddenly you think it's going to be like the huge adventure in N-Tranced, but no, this is actually a Crash Bash style game, for one player.
I remember I saw the mini games like weightlifting with Crunch, which was hard.
Yeah.
Button bashing.
Shooting sheep with bazookas.
Yes. They were cool
Or some
little
familiar
mini
games like Ballistic are back, and the tank minigame.
Oh, the lovely tank minigame.
That's good, because I rather like the tanks.
I have to disagree with you. The story, you have once again COCO and the Professor from Spyro the Dragon have been kidnapped by Nina, who we'll cover later, and you have to go out and rescue them, where you have to distract her by running away from her on pole, where she can actually keep up with you. So
yeah, all the boss fights play as a mini-game of their own as well. After that, COCO is able to devise a machine after Crash collects all the crystals that allows them to warp over to Cortex and Ripto's secret skybase. In addition to all the crystals and gems and other story-related elements that you need to get there, there are these mystery houses where you can play mini-games to win trading cards that you can collect and,
Trade.
Collect and trade, yeah. There's certain cards that are only available in one game or the other, and that's what encourages trading. And you need to do this to 100% the game, if you care to do that.
They also tried to make you buy both of the games because you would only get one side of the story, so you will have to collect both games to see the whole story development. And the graphics in this game,
the graphics, they're pretty much just like they were in the last Game Boy Advance games. Pretty good.
Yeah, they also took the SPYRO sprites from a SPYRO game that I just forgot.
From one of the SPYRO Game Boy Advance games?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the sprites of Crash are also from his other Game Boy Advance games, so... And the music. What do we have to say about the music? Pretty much like the last Game Boy Advance games?
Yeah.
Wait, no. In the last Game Boy Advance games, they were ripped from the PS1. These are new tracks. And I can't really remember many of them.
Yeah, nothing memorable sticks out, really.
Hold my hands up to that one because I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I only ever played this one rather briefly, so not a whole lot stands out in my head.
Overall, it's a really neat concept. I think the execution needed some work. I personally wouldn't have wanted to see this turned into a party game. I would have liked to see a proper adventure implemented. But I applaud the idea, at least. Overall, I'm going to give this game...
a good bit of innovation.
They should have did more with this, I think. And it was kind of a letdown, personally. I like it, yet it could have been more. This was such a missed opportunity. I can't give it better than a 5 out of 10.
I really like the concept of this one, and I kind of like the mini-games because it was different from Crash. It was a nice break. And it was, you know it's a spin-off, so it's not interfering with the main story too much, so I would give it about a 7.
Okay.
Just because I like the concept of Crash and Spyro working together.
And how about you, Nick?
Again, this is one that I really only played pretty briefly, and it was a nice, easy pick-up, put-down game as a handheld game you'd expect. And it was fun, and again, it would have been nice almost to see Crash and Spyro working together in a sort of Twinsanity setting, but for what it was a good little solid party game, and I'll give it a 7.
7, alright. Now, before we move on to the next game, there is one other minigame that I feel that should be mentioned that you find in Crash Purple. Crash Party is back, except this time it's called Spyro Party. You access it by holding L and R when you start up the game. It pretty much plays exactly like Crash Party does, except you're playing with Spyro this time. And for those who had Spyro Orange, they got the original Crash Party. Yeah, it's there. Give it a try if you ever want to see what it's like. And so with that, we move on to the next game. The last game, developed by Traveler's Tales now. Yes, they're back behind the wheel to bring us, finally, a new Crash experience. Now that they've recycled just about every concept that they could have. It's time for a new game, Crash Twinsanity, released in 2004 for the PS2 and the Xbox, but not the GameCube, because apparently the GameCube doesn't meet the graphic demand that this game has. Grumble, grumble.
Also billed in Japan as the 5th Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Bandicoot 5, The Ambition of Crash and Cortex.
So let's dive right into this thing. Starting off with the story. We see COCO dancing around in the flowers, chasing butterflies, with Cortex eavesdropping. He shoots her, stuns her, and apparently steals her clothes because he uses them to dress up as Crash's sister and lure Crash into a trap.
You must steal her hair as well.
Boy, imagine the look on COCO's face when she woke to that. So one brief tutorial level later, Crash arrives at a quote-unquote birthday party, because I think this is his 10th anniversary game.
2004 the release.
2004 and the first game was 1996, so no, that's...
10 years after original development started.
That skunk lied to me!
I've been doing this for 10 stinking years! Back and forward, and I'm sick of it! Well, I'm not gonna do it no more!
10 years since the original development began.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if he was moving left and right in 1994. But back to our story. After a quick nostalgic fight with Cortex where you're hitting green lasers back at him,
A nice throwback.
the two of them go crashing down into a cave, fighting with each other the whole way, which is another interesting gameplay element about this game, but we'll get to that later. Eventually, Cortex meets up with a couple of parrots named
Victor and Moritz.
They apparently come from a place called the 10th Dimension, and they have sights to destroy Insanity Island.
Two evil parrots turn up with nefarious plans.
Cortex needs more mind power to defeat these because he cannot defeat them alone, and Crash doesn't have any mind power. So they go to the Academy of Evil and bring in Cortex's younger niece called Nina, who was mentioned before.
Who was mentioned briefly in Crash Purple, yes.
Yeah. This was her first... No.
This was her first canon appearance into the series.
Yes, her first official outing, and here is a new character for you who will explain.
Yeah. There's a lot of levels of running around the school trying to find her.
And let's not forget our obligatory collect all the crystals staple.
Keep back, you weak-minded fool! Avert your gaze or you'll go crystal crazy!
Eventually, the three of them go back to Cortex's castle, warp themselves to the 10th Dimension, find these two evil parrots, confront them.
But they stumble along Evil Crash, not to be confused with Fake Crash. This
Yes,
is Evil Crash
this
from
is
the
a completely
10th
different
dimension.
Crash. A Crash of a different dimension.
Well, the 10th dimension is the opposite to Crash's dimension.
That means Cortex must be the good guy in this dimension, although we never see him.
You only see Evil Crash and Evil COCO.
Yeah, we never actually see evil COCO in this game, do we?
There is concept art of her.
Yeah.
And I believe you can unlock that.
I'm sure it shows her.
Yeah, it does at some point. Maybe it was deleted, though. I'm not sure. But yes, the original game was supposed to have an evil COCO in this, and COCO herself was intended to have a bigger role in the game.
My crystals!
Oh well. Let's talk about the gameplay for a bit, because there's a lot here that I want to cover.
Yeah.
A lot of the concepts that we saw in the previous games are back, but there are a few gameplay mechanics that have changed that might catch you off guard. For example, touching Nitro will kill you instantly, even if you have a mask.
Yes, I remember that. It was definitely the first time I came across that described.
And checkpoint crates will break before you even get to them.
Imagine.
And also saved your game.
Yeah, saving your games is done by breaking a world crate, which is another thing that's probably worth mentioning, is that the levels this time are not divided by a warp room. Instead, it's all treated as one really long level that you're going through the entire game, divided by
Like
warp.
Sonic Adventure, it reminds me of, where you're going from place to place and that.
Yeah, but there's no hub level, which is what the adventure fields were.
True. Still reminds me of it. Makes it hard to go back and collect things if you've missed stuff, because it means you have to run through levels.
Yeah, I find that a little annoying. So if you're playing to 100% the game, you should probably make sure you've collected everything before moving on. Which is the next thing I want to cover, is that gems this time are not collected by breaking all the boxes in the stage. Instead, they're just skewered about each quote-unquote level. And each gem you collect unlocks a video, an animation, an artwork, or something. Viewed from the main
Concept art.
So let's talk a little bit about the new gameplay, because there are a few things I really like in this game. Like, for example, Cortex will be running off in one direction because he's got a beehive stuck on his head, and Crash has to activate a series of gizmos to keep him alive.
Yeah. There's a lot of new stuff in here, which is nice.
I also like the levels where they're fighting with each other and they come into a ball, and you have to guide them left and right to make sure they don't fall off a pit or something.
The thing with this game is that they tried to make it more comical.
And I think they succeeded in that regard.
Yeah, I think they did, yeah.
Every level is based on someone messing up or fighting or...
It was almost just the Three Stooges Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah, I can see that.
My only complaint about this one is that Neo Cortex is an evil genius. Why did they make him so stupid?
We require 6 power crystals in order to make the leap, and we have 4. Let's see. That isn't enough!
Yeah, he seems to be getting progressively dumber throughout the series, and you know who else is having that problem? Uka Uka.
An evil greater than even yours threatens to destroy this world.
No!
That's my job!
Join me, and together we shall defeat this evil infestation.
I like a challenge. I accept. This should be fun!
We'll show that creep the real superpower of teamwork!
And Cortex has it a lot worse. If you'll remember from the first game, he's all like,
Done!
and then later on he's like,
Can't you ever let me win?
He takes too much of the comedy character when it's meant to be Crash. Crash is meant to be the funny character. Cortex is meant to be the evil character. If he's not evil, the game doesn't seem threatening and challenging in any way. If they're just making...
at least not from Cortex's point of view.
Just making him look stupid all the time, so...
Because there's always some greater evil that's going to one-up him.
Crash, I've been like a father to you. I created you, nursed you, tried to destroy you.
The same can be said. They also brought in the evil twins, but one of them still acts silly. He's a comical character. There's too many comical characters in this game.
Let me see. I might have some chalky treats here for you.
Chalky treats? Ooh, ooh! Oh, nuts. There's nuts? Zero losers! Hey, is it lunchtime yet?
I understand it's supposed to be a comical game, but I believe most of the comedy should be coming from Crash and, say, funny death.
Yes, there's no funny deaths in this game, which is
I think there's
not...
a few, like when Cortex and Crash fall off a pit and they're both flapping their arms trying to stay up.
He's not getting squashed
I
into
got
a
a
chute.
smirk out of that.
No.
Not a whole lot of funny stuff here, I guess.
The bees.
These were funny, yeah. But again, that's happening to Cortex. That should be happening to, well, no, not Crash, but somebody else.
It should be happening to Crash.
Bad things don't happen to Crash. He's the hero.
Yeah, but that's where you're wrong. Bad things do happen to Crash.
Yeah.
Look at the first 3 games with the deaths.
So these bad things need to happen to somebody else, and unfortunately Cortex is the only other person it can happen to, apparently.
My point is, this game seems a bit mixed up to me. They can't decide what everyone's characters are, and they've mixed them a bit and jumble them around, and I think Crash gets pushed to the side a bit, while Cortex takes all the funny jokes and liners, even though Crash can't talk.
Well, Cortex is the only protagonist here who can talk.
Graphics.
No, just call it
I like the graphics.
Somebody cover it.
I mean, there's a reason it didn't come to the GameCube.
I like the graphics, but to me the world seemed a tad bit empty.
Well, that's because they had to make a huge world where everything is connected as one giant level, so a good portion of it's probably going to be empty.
It just didn't seem alive like the other ones.
But that was their design choice. I mean, who could forget the scene where you're on a hover platform and all you see around you is endless ocean as you're flying up a mountain up to the next level. So yeah, I can see what you mean.
Yeah, it was just a little bit emptied for me.
I didn't have too many issues with the controls. I mean, it felt a little weird doing slide jumping, because he seems to do more of a long jump than a high jump. And Nina's little stretchy arm trick, when you try and connect with a hook, is sometimes a problem. But otherwise, I didn't have too much problem.
My main complaint about controls in this one is the camera. You could never point it in the direction you wanted it to, because it was a free spinning camera, which made...
That definitely stood out for me too.
Where you had to jump on platforms to get to the top of an iceberg, it made it very difficult with the spinning camera.
Well, the camera has to be in all sorts of different places as you progress in each level, which, I remind you, is all acted as one.
I always found my camera getting stuck in corners and things. My camera clipping issues as well always seem to crop up.
Yeah, I guess it can be pretty annoying.
But other than that,
overall, it's a pretty solid experience, and certainly the best Crash game we've seen since Crash Warped.
Yeah.
This one's a lot more story-based, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I like this game quite a bit. So much of this game reminds me of Crash 1. The first boss battle with Cortex, it resembles the final boss of Crash 1. There's a level in this game where you fight security cameras and jump over hot pipes, much like the ones in the heavy machinery levels of Crash 1. You travel from island to island to progress through the game, just like Crash 1. We also hear more about the Volvo Ray in this game, a concept unseen since Crash 1. I gave Crash 1 an 8 out of 10. And I'll be doing the same for this game too. It's the best Crash game in the post-Naughty Dog era.
I like I said, I like the story-based this one. It makes the characters have a lot more personality than just doing plain platformers and a 30-second cutscene in between each one. Oh, the references to the other old Crash games, like having Papu and the skunk, the hog. Just before Cortex gets attacked by the bees, he points at the hog. So I give this one a 8 as well.
Great. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I enjoyed this game. It was really nice to be going back in many ways to series roots to be actually with the characters again up close. I do agree that it's always like you can put Pinky in the brain in the cartoon and it'll work. You've got a good character and a stupid character, but they always felt like I was having too many Pinky in the brains at the same time.
Are you pondering what I'm pondering, Pinky?
I think so, Brain, but a show about 2 talking lab mice? It'll never get on the air.
And it detracts from Crash a bit in that point. But besides that, it was a really good, solid game, and definitely, as you said, the best in a long time, so I'll give it an 8.
Alright, 8s across the board. This gets 24 out of 30. And so, that covers the Traveler's Tales / Vicarious Visions era of the Crash series. And join us for our third and final part where we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Crash series. And I do mean ugly. But we shall see you next time.
It is I, Aku Aku. My duty is to protect you. You may summon me by breaking open these crates. Call me thrice, and I shall grant you special powers. What have I got?